All right, everybody, let's talk about diction or word choice in our novel of Mice and Men. Diction are the words an author chooses to use to convey meaning. The choice of words will tell the reader a lot about the character and setting. For example, think about the difference between the words warm, hot, and steamy. Hot and steamy are adjectives that describe varying degrees of warmth. Based on the example sentences below, you can see that by simply changing one word, it can change the idea of the sentence. So which is your ideal day to ride a bike? Number 1, is it the day Danny rode his bike on a warm summer day? Number 2, the day Danny rode his bike on a hot summer day? Or 3, Danny rode his bike on a steamy summer day? My ideal day to bike ride would be number 1, on a warm summer day. Not too hot with the sun beating down on me, and not too steamy, so not too humid and I'm not sweating a lot. By examining the author's word choice, you can learn about the characters and the feelings the author wants to convey about these characters. Compare the following 2 sentences and think about the difference in the character description. Which description do you think best describes Lenny? Number 1, Lenny, who was a big guy, didn't know what to do or how to act, so he simply imitated George. George took care of him for most of his life. They were family. Or number 2, Lenny Small was a large, hulking beast of a man with a tender heart. One might describe him as a large teddy bear who didn't know his own strength. His understanding of the world and people in it was minimal. Not because he didn't want to understand, but because his brain didn't have the capacity to understand. His friend and companion George helped Lenny navigate the world. They took care of each other like family. Which description best describes Lenny's character? You probably guessed it, number 2. Let's look at the difference between character description 1 and 2 briefly. So, you might notice in number 2 that it includes Lenny's last name, Small. That adds a bit of irony to our character description, considering how large and hulking of a beast Lenny was, right? So those adjectives, large, hulking, and beast, really help paint a picture of Lenny and his stature. He also had a tender heart, right? So very kind. He didn't know his own strength. That tells us that there was a disconnect for Lenny between how to be gentle, how to be rough, how to be firm. He only knew one way. His understanding of the world was minimal, okay? Because he didn't have the brain capacity to understand it. That hints at a mental intellect that is much lower than average, right? Now look at friend and companion George. George wasn't just his friend, he was a companion. A companion is someone that you spend almost every moment with of your life. Okay? So you can see that number 2 helps us get a little bit more insight into the character of Lenny than description number 1. He didn't just imitate George, right? He wasn't just a big guy, okay? He was a large, hulking beast of a man with a tender heart who didn't have the capacity to understand the way the world worked and why. So he luckily had his friend and companion, George. Here are your directions for this analysis activity. Read the following passage from the beginning of the second section. There are 5 descriptive words or phrases highlighted. In the space below, explain the importance of the highlighted description the author uses. Consider what each phrase tells the reader about the character and the world they live in. Here is a description of the bunkhouse. Over each bunk there was nailed an apple box with the opening forward so that it made 2 shelves for the personal belongings of the occupant of the bunk. And these shelves were loaded with little articles, soap and talcum powder, razors, and those Western magazines ranchmen loved to read and scoff at secretly. And there were medicines on the shelves, and little vials, combs, and from nails on the box sides a few neckties. Near one wall there was a black cast iron stove, its stovepipe going straight up through the ceiling. In the middle of the room stood a big square table littered with playing cards, and around it were grouped boxes for the players to sit in. So, I have highlighted 5 pieces of diction, okay? Words carefully chosen by the author to describe how these men were living. What I have done, okay, is provided you with 2 examples of what I want you to do with these highlighted phrases. So for example, you see nailed an apple box. Nailed an apple box. So over each bunk there was nailed an apple box. It isn't a regular shelf, it's a box that was simply laying around. The men aren't even given the courtesy of having a real shelf in their bunkhouse. They're just not that important to the farmer's owner. Let's talk about the choice of occupant. Not a man or a person, just an occupant, someone who lives at a place for a brief time. The workers on the farm are migrants and only there for a short time. Also, why not use the word men or man instead? Because the author wants the reader to understand how expendable or easily replaceable these workers are. I want you to take a look at 3, 4, and 5. I have provided you with phrases of diction that I think are important in explaining our characters and talking about how society viewed them. So you need to take a look at these highlighted phrases, little articles, nails on the sides, a few neckties, littered with playing cards, and think about why the author chose that phrasing and what does that phrasing tell us about these characters. If you're stuck, you can select these and you'll see a call-out window appear. I've tried to pose some questions to help you get answers down. So for little articles, why use the word little? Why not big? Do these men have more possessions? When I consider the actual articles, is there anything significant about these, like the talcum powder? For nails on the sides and a few neckties, why do the workers own neckties? What does this tell us about some of these workers? Why do they keep them? Okay, if they're field hands. And 5, littered with playing cards. What does this phrase tell you about the characters and migrant workers? What kind of men are they? Are they neat? Are they dirty? Are they always in a hurry if the cards are just thrown on the table? When you have finished putting your thoughts down for 3, 4, and 5, and you have answered reading comprehension questions 1 through 10, turn this document into Schoology. Thanks. Have a great day.